I knew the room didn't know who I was when they skipped over my name during roll call. Not mispronounced, skipped. Like I was some office ghost who haunted the budget sheets and mysteriously approved vendor forms from a desk no one remembered assigning. That was the moment I realized the new director, Janice Optimization by Axe Thornton, had no clue what I actually did at Stratodyne Solutions. Which, frankly, was perfect. You don't survive 3 years in a company like Stratodyne by being loud. You survive by being useful and hard to define. My badge said Project Resource Analyst, which could mean anything from tracking printer toner to laundering bribes for the VP of Sales. What it really meant, though, was that I was embedded under a confidential compliance program spun up quietly after a federal settlement they'd rather forget. My job was to monitor risk patterns in expense flows, vendor contracts, and grant allocations, then file them into a secure system with my signature and a timestamp. No fanfare, no meetings, just clean, watchful silence. My office was a former janitor's closet wedged behind records. No windows, two flickering fluorescents. The AC vent dripped when it rained, which made budgeting season feel like a leaky prison sentence. But I had a door, two locks, and a terminal hardwired to the archive system. Paradise. Every day I reviewed logs like a librarian with a grudge. Duplicate vendor entries. PO requests with last-minute address changes. Emergency wire transfers sent at 4:59 p.m. on Fridays. All of it. Most folks didn't even know we had a vendor hierarchy flagging system. I built it, quietly, carefully, line by line across 3 fiscal years. And then Janice arrived. With her clicky heels, PowerPoint swagger, and a gleam in her eye that said bloodletting season was open. The kind of woman who used synergy unironically and treated every meeting like a TED talk for sociopaths. First weekend, she hosted a town hall with a slide titled Strategic Workforce Realignment, which we all knew meant people are about to get fired with cupcakes in the break room. She didn't know me. She didn't care. She was there to clean house, and I wasn't even listed in the house. Perfect camouflage, until it wasn't. Somewhere around week 2, she started asking questions. Why do we have someone logging archival compliance trends if we already have finance? Who's Mia Reynolds? Is she even billable? I kept my head down. Quiet compliance is like fishing with dynamite, best done once at the right moment. No sense in wasting bait. Oh, and if you've made it this far without tapping out, do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button. Maybe toss us a like. 90% of folks listen and vanish like Janice's accountability. But hey, your support keeps this leaky ceiling funded and the team running on more than expired vending machine coffee. Thanks back to our scheduled programming. I could feel the current shift when my keycard access was restricted. Not revoked, just limited. Break room, denied. East Wing copy room, blocked. Janice had started carving the org chart like a Thanksgiving turkey, and I was apparently giblets. Still, I kept logging everything. Every restructured team name, every mass vendor reassignment, every approval she rubber-stamped without looking. All of it went into the system, time-stamped, immutable, and then came the email from HR. Subject line, clarifying role redundancies. Body, hi Mia. Please meet with Director Thornton in Finance at 2:30 p.m. tomorrow to review your position alignment and potential transition options. Bring your badge and device. No room for questions. No signature. Just cold protocol and implied doom. I read it once, then twice, then laughed so hard I knocked over my cold coffee. You see, 2 years ago, I'd authored a clause, buried deep in a vendor audit procedure. Section 7B required executive oversight for any personnel changes that affected flagged compliance roles tied to government contracts. Terminating one without said oversight triggered an automatic escalation to federal monitoring and opened the gates to every archive log I'd ever filed. They never removed my system access. They couldn't. I didn't even need to warn them. I just had to show up. Janice came in like a Category 5 LinkedIn post, buzzwords, bullet points, and absolutely no understanding of what the hell she was actually doing. First day, she parked in the C-suite reserve spot, spilled her branded coffee on the carpet, and spent the morning renaming internal teams like she was customizing Sims characters. Ops was now Agility Command. Procurement became Vendor Velocity. Compliance? Business Integrity Optimization, which, coincidentally, was the same acronym I used for BSIOUs. She introduced herself at the weekly all-hands with a tone that could curdle paint. Hi everyone, I'm Janice and I'm here to streamline success. Translation, heads are gonna roll and HR's got the Nerf bat ready. I sat in the back of the room near the door, standard ghost consultant position. She skipped over me in introductions, twice, not out of malice, just pure radiant ignorance. To her, I was furniture. Maybe a vendor, maybe an intern, either way. Not important enough to register. It was almost beautiful. Until the reorg spreadsheet surfaced. Janice, in her infinite wisdom, decided the entire department needed to be resurfaced structurally, which meant Excel hell for HR and a color-coded bloodbath for the rest of us. Everyone had to be plotted, ranked, and reallocated. Boxes, roles, chains of command. But guess who didn't have a box? Me. There I was, Mia Reynolds, left off every chart matrix. Team map, no dotted lines. No hard lines, not even a question mark in the margins. I had been erased digitally and organizationally like I was never there. The irony? I designed the internal team charting logic 3 years ago. Janice took it as an oversight. I assume this is just a paperwork miss. We've got a lot of redundancy noise we're cleaning up, she told HR, snapping her fingers like she was ordering a side of relevance. I felt the flicker then, not fear, not anger, just alertness. The kind of internal click you feel when you realize someone's about to light a fuse they don't understand. I kept quiet, smiled, took notes. Janice, meanwhile, had already pivoted into full restructure mode. She held a vendor review meeting later that week where she openly mocked our legacy systems. Why do we need 3 approval layers for subcontractor rotation? She asked, spinning around in her chair like a teenager at a model UN conference. Can't we just condense this to one signer and a smile? I didn't answer, but I did flag that quote in my notes. Verbatim. Janice had just suggested bypassing a key compliance control on a flagged federal grant vendor. That vendor had been under my observation for 6 quarters. Ghost billing, inflated hours, mysterious meal receipts at steakhouse chains in cities we didn't even operate in. Now, the new director wanted to give them more freedom. She started holding impromptu synergy sessions where staff were expected to throw out dead weight processes. Most folks suggested ditching the quarterly morale survey. One poor soul suggested the ethics training module. I watched Janice's eyes light up at that one like it was Christmas morning. That was the day I knew we were accelerating toward impact. Still, I stayed off radar. Until that Friday morning. I got a calendar invite from Janice herself. Subject, alignment discussion. 30 minutes, small conference room. Attendees, me, Janice, and the CFO dialed in remotely. I didn't flinch, didn't panic. I just stood up, locked my office, and pulled a file folder from the bottom drawer. It was labeled, in case of ego-driven implosion. Inside, a printout of Section 7B, screenshots of Janice's vendor override requests, and a copy of the audit trail logs from the past 18 months, each one signed by me and encrypted into the system's compliance archive. Janice thought she was about to restructure me out of the way. What she didn't know, she was kicking a tripwire buried under 3 years of her predecessor's cover-ups. And she just gave it a name, hers. The day layoffs started, the air in the building changed. You could taste the tension, like stale coffee filtered through panic and printer toner. The quiet ones walked around with cardboard boxes already flattened in their bags, like soldiers packing their own body bags. The loud ones made jokes in the break room about survivor's guilt while stealing other people's yogurt. Janice was in her element. She strutted through the halls like she was filming a reality show called Corporate Hunger Games. Lean edition, clipboard in hand, CFO in her earpiece, HR trailing behind her like a hungover puppy. At one point, she actually said, out loud in the middle of an open floor, I don't fire people, I liberate org charts. Janice didn't do subtle. She was more of a blunt force PowerPoint kind of gal. Departments were gutted under the label of vendor reassessment. Her logic? Why have in-house when you can outsource and call it innovation? Never mind that some of those vendors she wanted to reevaluate were under federal watch flags. Never mind that I'd personally built those oversight flags into the system because we'd already been burned by them during the 2019 grant scandal. But Janice didn't ask. She just started swinging the machete. That week I counted 17 terminations, all rubber-stamped by Janice. No formal documentation from compliance. No sign-offs from legal. Just a CFO who kept shrugging and saying, if Janice thinks it's clean, I'll bless it. Bless it. Actually said that. And then came the leadership call. Monthly senior ops sync. Mandatory attendance for all managers and above. I was only there because my clearance badge still pinged green and the invites hadn't caught up to my apparent invisibility. The call started with Janice sharing her vision for operational efficiency. She used phrases like sharpening the blade and cutting dead weight so many times, I thought she was reading from a Dexter script, and she opened it up for questions. That's when someone, I think it was Naveen from legal, asked innocently, hey, can someone clarify what Mia Reynolds' current function is? She's not mapped under Janice's org, but she's still on the system's list. Janice didn't hesitate. Oh, Mia, I looked into that. Looks like an old role that was never properly sunset. Some sort of archival analyst? I mean, lovely person, I'm sure, but we've got AI now. You don't need people logging spreadsheets in a closet. And she laughed. She actually laughed like she'd just delivered a zinger on late-night TV. A few others chuckled too, those little performative office giggles people give when they're trying not to get fired themselves. I didn't say a word. I just muted my mic, opened my audit dashboard, and checked the auto-escalation timer I'd coded into the compliance interface. 30 days without proper review on a flagged termination sequence, and it would automatically alert our external auditors. Janice had started the clock without knowing it. Later that afternoon, she sent me an email. Subject, alignment follow-up. Body, hi Mia, following up on our discussion. Please prepare a summary of your current functions, time allocations, and perceived value add within 48 hours. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. She wasn't asking. She was building a paper trail, something to justify cutting me loose without triggering alarm bells. but she didn't know I was the alarm bell, every audit trail, every vendor override. Every compliance trigger embedded in our contract systems had one name attached to the review stamp, mine. You don't delete the tripwire and expect the minefield to disappear. Still, I waited. No grand speeches. No warnings, just quiet footsteps to the server room, where I backed up the latest access logs and attached them to a mirrored drive. Pressure was building, you could feel it. Emails came slower. Janice started copying fewer people on her decisions. Finance went from we're aligned to let's circle back. And the best part, she thought I was too passive to notice. She mistook my silence for compliance. She didn't realize it was patience. Loaded, counting down. HR booked the smallest conference room they had, like they were trying to make my exit feel cozy. There was a stale lemon air freshener in the corner that had given up sometime around 2017. One sad ficus leaned toward the window like it knew what was coming. I arrived 2 minutes early. Always did. That was the kind of ghost I was, quiet, punctual, methodical. I sat at the far end of the table, back straight, tablet in hand. Janice strolled in like she'd just aced a Shark Tank pitch, all smug grin and let's get this over with energy. Her blazer was brighter than usual, some blinding coral power suit like she'd dressed to be the star of her own execution video. HR trailed behind her, carrying a manila folder with my name on it like a waiter delivering your last meal. On screen, the CFO was already dialed in. Camera off, audio hot. "Good afternoon, Mia," Janice said, settling into her seat across from me. "Thanks for coming in. I'll be brief since I know you're detail-oriented." I didn't answer. I didn't nod. I just opened the tablet on my lap and let it glow to life like a silent witness. Janice smirked and flipped open her copy of the script. It was all theater, and she fancied herself a brilliant actress in some HR procedural. We've been reviewing organizational alignment and found certain roles that no longer fit within our evolving strategy. Roles like yours, for example. She looked at me like she expected tears, or rage, or begging. Instead, she got stillness. She continued undeterred. "This isn't a performance-based decision, it's just optimization. You know how it is, trimming the hedges. We're doing you a favor, really. Gives you a chance to recalibrate your career." "Dead weight, I think you called it in the leadership call," I said, finally. She blinked. That fake laugh again. "Oh, that was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." The CFO cleared his throat. "Janice, maybe let's stick to the official language." No, it's fine," she cut him off. "Mia knows we're just trying to clean up some outdated functions. And honestly, she's been coasting under the radar for a long time. This'll be a good push. Time to evolve." That's when I tapped the screen on my tablet. A single document opened. A protected PDF, my initials in the corner. Stratodine header at the top. Vendor Compliance Integrity Memo dated 2022. Janice kept talking, still in her monologue. "We've prepared a standard exit package. Nothing dramatic, just the usual non-compete and confidentiality." Her voice trailed off when she noticed the screen. "What's that?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. I rotated the tablet slightly, not enough to let her read the whole thing, just enough to spotlight the header of Section 7B. Vendor Oversight Clause Mandatory Federal Escalation Trigger. She squinted, leaned forward. I could see the wheels turning in her brain, slow, unfamiliar wheels that didn't like being woken up. The CFO spoke, his voice suddenly clipped. "Mia, where did you get that?" "It's mine," I said simply. "I wrote it. You both signed off on it 2 years ago during the vendor restructure after the failed grant audits." Janice looked at the screen, then at me, and back at the screen like she was waiting for the words to change. "I'm sorry, I don't understand what this is," she said. "Of course you don't," I said. "That's the problem." HR glanced between us, eyes wide, like she'd just walked into a hostage negotiation she wasn't trained for. Janice pointed at the clause. "This, whatever this is, it doesn't matter. We've already got legal clearance." The CFO coughed. Loudly. "Mia," he said, voice suddenly tight. "Is this tied to the flagged vendor under the Federal Compliance Monitor?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Janice's expression flickered, smirk faltering, eyes darting. I'm sure we can review this. Maybe it's outdated." "It's not," I said, tapping the timestamp on the screen. "Last verified 36 days ago. And this meeting just logged a compliance event." She paled. The room went quiet. The CFO muttered something, possibly a curse, and then, without another word, disconnected from the call. Gone. Janice was alone now, no backup, no script. I closed the tablet, stood, and calmly placed it in my bag. I looked at Janice one last time, not with anger, not even satisfaction, just certainty. "You really should read what you sign," I said, and walked out, leaving her in the lemon-scented silence. The door didn't slam behind me. I didn't storm out or throw a dramatic glance over my shoulder. I just walked, slow, deliberate, like I was leaving a dentist's office, not detonating a multi-million-dollar liability bomb. That was the thing about silence. When deployed right, it sounds like thunder after the fact. Back in my office, I didn't sit. Just stood by the window, wall with a vent, technically watching dust particles dance in the flickering fluorescence. The quiet buzz of the overhead light matched the hum in my skull. The game was moving now. I tapped the clause. The logs were pinged. The internal monitoring system had timestamped the event and already cross-referenced it with our flagged vendor list. And that list? Well, let's talk about that. 2 years ago, we found a consulting vendor, Dynex Global, billing Stratodine for risk intelligence services. Sounded impressive. What they actually did was ghostwrite reports using AI templates and mark up the price 400%. They had no physical office. Their CEO was a rented persona. Their invoices always seemed to hit our books the same week quarterly numbers were due. A little too convenient. I flagged them in our system, quietly. Labeled them V12 tier, our internal code for external entity under federal observation with historical financial irregularities. Part of the clause I wrote back then tied certain employee roles, like mine, directly to those vendors. Fire the wrong person without going through compliance protocols. It tripped an escalation. It wasn't just company policy. It was part of our post-settlement agreement with the feds. The clause was dry, bureaucratic, and invisible to anyone who skimmed, but it was real, and Janice had just stomped right through it like it was a welcome mat. 10 minutes after the meeting, the CFO called back. I didn't pick up. I let it ring out once, twice, then went to voicemail. Not out of spite, timing, let him stew. Let the panic blossom into action. 20 minutes later, I got an internal ping from legal. Subject, review request, vendor escalation clause, now that was fast. I walked to the records server room, keyed in my clearance, slipped past the humming machines, and pulled the backup I'd archived the week prior. Just in case. Because I knew Janice was the type to delete first and ask questions during depositions. As the backup loaded, my screen filled with green rows of vendor logs, staff approvals, and compliance chains. All pristine, all traceable. And right there, shining like a neon I told you so, was the audit trail from Dynex Global, marked flagged with the most recent entry being termination of internal contractor with oversight designation. Time 2:42 p.m. Triggered by J. Thornton, I didn't smile, not because I wasn't satisfied, but because there was too much work left to do. At 3:10, my desk phone rang. I answered on the third ring. Not too eager, not too cold. Mia, the CFO's voice crackled, tight, edged. I need to clarify something from earlier. That clause you pulled up, yes, I said, already knowing where this was going. He hesitated. I imagined him sweating through a tailored button-down in his glass office, legal already circling like buzzards. Is that clause tied to Dynex? I let silence hang just long enough for him to feel it, and I said it's tied to all V12 flagged vendors. Dynex included. Jesus Christ, he muttered. A chair creaked, papers shuffled. Janice didn't run this by anyone. I didn't sign off on the termination officially. There was no compliance consult. Nothing in the chain, I said nothing. He continued, quieter now. Mia, the clause, does it trigger automatic escalation? Yes, to who? Federal contract oversight via the compliance relay. And has that already? It's already gone out. Dead silence. I could practically hear the blood draining from his face. Mia, he said, voice hushed now. What else is in that system? Everything, I said. Everything they thought no one was watching. He didn't respond. The call ended with a click, not a goodbye, and just like that, the power shifted. Not with a bang, not with screaming, but with one clause, one line. One overlooked paragraph in a sea of paper. It had been there the whole time. It just never thought it mattered. Until now, Janice looked at the tablet like it was hissing. Her fingers hovered, unsure if she should scroll, snatch it, or set it on fire. Her smirk had calcified into something brittle, edges cracking under the weight of confusion she didn't know how to admit. She turned toward the screen. Can we just clarify what this clause means? She asked, voice lowered but tight with manufactured calm. The CFO leaned forward. You could see the transformation on his face. First the curiosity of a man being asked about something vaguely familiar, then the stomach-drop realization that he wasn't just late to the party, he was standing in the ashes. He blinked. Wait, is this the flag project? His tone wasn't curious anymore, it was surgical. Like a doctor realizing the patient's cough wasn't seasonal, it was stage 4. Janice tried to keep her voice smooth. I think there might be a misunderstanding here. We're talking about one contractor. I didn't realize Mia's function was still tied to that program. Honestly, I thought it had sunset. No, it hasn't, the CFO said flatly. This isn't a misunderstanding. You just pulled the kill switch on a compliance trigger. I assumed someone would have. No one did. He cut her off. And now the system's already flagged the termination. If the clause is live, it's already sent. He paused, his head dropped slightly. You could see the line in his jaw harden like a man watching the stock ticker bleed red. Christ, Janice, he muttered, then turned his eyes to me, first time during the meeting. Mia, was this deliberate? I didn't blink. I document. That's what I've always done. He stared for a second longer, then looked away like he couldn't hold the weight of it. A beat passed. Then he reached for his mouse, eyes cold. Janice will follow up, he said, clipped separately, and then he ended the call, just like that. Gone. The screen flickered to black. The quiet in that tiny, lemon-scented conference room hit like a hammer. Janice froze. Her hands stayed hovering above the table like she didn't know what to do with them anymore. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again, like maybe if she just rebooted herself, this would all go away. You didn't tell him you were terminating me, I said, gently sliding the tablet back into my tote. You didn't tell legal. You didn't review the vendor list. You didn't check the clause logs, you just acted. Her voice, when it came, was more breath than sound. I thought you were just records. I stood. I didn't scream, didn't gloat, just shouldered the bag and turned to the door. You really should stop thinking, I said, calm as a sunrise. It's dangerous in your case. Behind me, she didn't move, just sat there. Linking into the void, I opened the door, stepped into the hallway. The carpet felt softer. The fluorescent hum sounded almost melodic. 3 years of buried audit logs, redundant meetings, whispered compliance warnings, and ignored flags, and it all came down to this. One line in one document Janice didn't bother to read. And now, the gears were turning. Not because I pushed, because she did. All I had to do was let them crush her. By the time I got home that night, I had 12 missed calls from various Stratadine extensions. Legal, risk, even procurement, oddly enough. No voicemails, just frantic missed calls stacked like dominoes in my call log, each one timestamped closer and closer together like the rising heartbeat of an incoming heart attack. I didn't answer any of them. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet, turned off my phone, and let the silence wrap around me like an old friend. Meanwhile, back in the Stratadine trenches, the machine I'd quietly engineered for 3 years was coming to life with surgical efficiency. The federal compliance alert had already landed. The system was designed that way. Once a flagged contractor was removed from a monitored vendor chain without proper authorization, the internal risk protocol auto-escalated. External auditors received a mirror packet via encrypted handoff, complete with logs, timestamps, and cross-referenced anomalies. It didn't ask for permission. It informed them that something had gone wrong. At 8:12 a.m. the next morning, Stratadine's general counsel walked into Janice's office with a printed email from the Federal Oversight Bureau, subject line, immediate clarification requested termination of flagged risk roll. By 9:00 a.m., compliance was tearing through archived reports trying to figure out who the hell Mia Reynolds had been and why her name was all over a buried documentation system they barely knew existed. Someone on the internal audit team, a junior analyst named Derek, finally opened the legacy server folder labeled MR. Recon do not modify. Inside, 37 compliance reports. Each one annotated, cross-indexed, bulletproof, each one naming Janice, or someone in her chain, as authorizing override decisions on vendor approvals without appropriate reviews. Some were minor. A few were gray areas, but a handful tied directly to the post-settlement remediation contract Stratadine had signed with the feds in 2021, the one that came with very specific rules, very specific language, and very real consequences for material compliance interference. Janice didn't know the phrase at first. She learned it when legal read it aloud to her in a closed-door meeting that afternoon. According to what my contact in risk later told me, whispered through a signal message with one eye over their shoulder, Janice tried to claim the clause was ambiguous. Said I never made my role clear, that I operated in the shadows. But then they found the internal onboarding memo, the one signed by the former CFO, stamped confidential, outlining my role as Stratadine's embedded compliance monitor for high-risk vendor contracts. Dated, sealed, untouched. Turns out I wasn't just some analyst lurking near records. I was the safeguard, the fail-safe written into their settlement to prove good faith. The human trigger for a system designed to detect exactly the kind of reckless, short-sighted behavior Janice had served up like an amuse-bouch at her own firing party. Within 48 hours, 3 things happened. Legal requested a full timeline of Janice's actions from the day she was hired. Stratadine's board convened a private session to review breach ramifications. My LinkedIn profile, quiet for years, saw a 900% spike in profile views. I didn't post anything, didn't change my job title, didn't even update the banner photo. Let them wonder. Let them scroll through my activity tab and see the years of nothingness and assume I'd just been coasting. Because they'd never understand the value of staying invisible long enough to let their own systems indict them. The gears were grinding now. Internal investigations, external auditors, suddenly panicked executives trying to plug leaks in a dam they didn't know existed. And every audit trail led to me. Not as the whistleblower, not as the angry employee, but as the person they were supposed to protect and forgot. Janice, she was still technically employed, but under review now. Her access revoked, her calendar cleared, her Slack profile tagged on leave with no return date. HR speak for we're building the case before she builds hers, and I was a ghost again, watching, waiting, knowing the echoes had only just begun. The board meeting took place on a Wednesday because apparently, that's when billion-dollar panic tastes best over catered breakfast burritos and Nespresso. Officially, it was labeled Special Session, Compliance Risk Review. Unofficially, it was Janice's funeral and the CFO's confession booth. They held it in the glass-walled executive conference room on the 23rd floor. The one with the skyline view no one actually enjoyed because the room was always freezing and smelled faintly of burnt toner and expensive failure. Inside, he had gathered the full board, legal, internal risk, a federal compliance liaison in a navy suit with no sense of humor, and one nervous executive assistant who kept refilling coffee like it was holy water. The presentation began with a single slide. Mia Reynolds oversight role classification. TIRA compliance asset post-settlement designation. The room reportedly went silent, like someone just confessed to murder silent. Then the VP of Audit cleared her throat and began reading excerpts from the original 2021 settlement agreement, highlighted in red because Stratadine loves color-coded doom. Right there in black and white, buried on page 48, was the clause. All designated TIRA compliance assets are to be protected from direct termination, reassignment, or reorganization without joint approval from legal and federal oversight. Only person on record for terminating such an asset? Janice Thornton. Worse, she hadn't even known what a TIRA asset was. The VP flipped to the next slide. A scanned email from early March, subject line flag review needed MR, assignment status. The recipient, Janice, she never opened it. Another email, this time from internal risk, role mapping gaps urgent, do not modify flagged positions without legal. Same recipient, marked as read. No response. One more. This one from the old compliance officer who had since retired. Sent the week Janice was onboarded. Confidential role notes do not alter. Janice had replied, understood, will streamline as needed. The CFO shifted in his chair, his face pale. He tried weakly to claim confusion. She never briefed me on the classification. I assumed Mia was just back-end support. The federal liaison, who hadn't spoken until that point, interrupted. That assumption cost you oversight compliance. Your system registered a TIRA trigger, and now we're here. The board members weren't yelling. Stratadine's board didn't yell. They did something worse. They asked for printed copies. They took notes in leather-bound notebooks. One of them adjusted his tie 5 times in 30 seconds, like he was trying to strangle the regret out of his own neck. And in the middle of it all was my name. Not as a disgruntled employee. Not as a ghost, but as a safeguard. A living clause, a human firewall. A relic of a federal deal they thought they could file away in a cabinet and forget. One board member asked, why didn't anyone know who she was? The VP of Audit answered without missing a beat. Because she was doing her job right. That night, I got an email from an old colleague in IT. Subject, they know now. Body, you should have seen their faces. It was like watching someone realize the call was coming from inside the house, and the house had been recording them the whole time. I didn't reply. Just sat in the dark, rereading the email like it was a poem. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was tired, but in the way someone's tired after laying a trap and finally hearing it snap shut. They were beginning to understand, not just what I had been, but what I still was. Emergency board meeting took place in the early hours of Monday, because nothing says crisis like 7 suits in a room before sunrise, with no coffee strong enough to fix what's broken. The doors were shut, phones confiscated. No assistants, no smiles, no slide decks. Just a handful of people trying to triage the wreckage before the markets opened. Janice sat at the end of the table, a pale imitation of the power player she once styled herself to be. Gone was the coral blazer. She wore muted gray now, like the color could camouflage her in shame. Her notes were untouched. Her voice, when she used it, cracked from disuse and defeat. They gave her 5 minutes to explain herself. She lasted 2. I wasn't told Mia's role was protected, she began, hands trembling around a folder she didn't dare open. Her title wasn't clear, and there were no explicit warnings. I was working with limited information. The general counsel cut her off. Janice, you received multiple alerts, 3 emails from compliance, 1 from legal. System pings, you replied to one of them saying you'd streamline as needed. You were explicitly warned. I didn't think no, the CFO snapped. You didn't. The federal liaison was present again, seated in the corner like a quiet executioner. He didn't speak until legal asked about penalty projections. Worst case, legal said, looking at mandatory audits for all flagged vendors across 3 fiscal years. Grant clawbacks, suspension of government contracts. Best guess? Low 8 figures in fines. Minimum, no one cursed, they didn't need to. The silence in that room was louder than any obscenity. The chair of the board spoke next. Calm, composed. Do we believe Janice's actions meet the threshold for cause under executive separation terms? A unanimous nod followed. The vote was swift. Janice Thornton terminated for cause. All severance voided. NDA enforced. Reputation shredded not by rumor but by receipts. They didn't even look her in the eye as she gathered her things. One director turned his chair slightly, as if allergic to the moment. Another scribbled something into a notebook he'd probably burn later. And just like that, the hurricane Janice had brought with her was over. The damage, however, had only begun to be measured. 3 days later, I was seated in a sunlit cafe 2 blocks from a co-working space I'd recently rented under my new LLC, Reynolds Risk Consulting. Same laptop, new card, clean slate. I sipped espresso and scanned my inbox. 4 new messages. 2 were federal confirmations. One was from a former colleague, simply said you won. The 4th was a contact request from Stratadine's largest competitor. Subject line, discreet inquiry. Body, Miss Reynolds. I've been reviewing recent events and would like to speak with someone who understands proactive compliance defense and foresight. Your discretion is assumed. Let us know if you're open to a conversation. No fluff, no pitch deck. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a skill no one respected until it nearly destroyed them. I smiled, tapped the message, and started for follow-up. My phone buzzed again, a reminder that my schedule was clear. No one watching over me. No one ignoring my warnings. No one calling me just records. I pulled out my tablet, opened the compliance dashboard I'd rebuilt from scratch in my own environment. Streamlined, secure, mine. I tapped one line at the top of the screen, termination clause trigger history Janice Thornton. Then I closed the tablet, leaned back in my chair, and let the afternoon sun warm my face. They called me a liability, I whispered to no one in particular. I just let them prove it. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.